So exceeding expectations, India's economy quickened as the GDP rose a six-quarter high of 8.2% in the second quarter of this financial year, up from 5.6% in the same quarter last year. India remains the world's fastest growing major economy as the quarter's expansion is underpinned by strong rural and government expenditure as well as consumption boost from the recent GST rate cut. Prime Minister Modi has hailed 8.2% quarter two GDP growth, calling the numbers very encouraging. The Prime Minister also said that the latest GDP figures highlight the effectiveness of the government's reform-oriented approach. But the opposition isn't convinced. Congress's Jairam Ramesh and DMK have questioned the credibility of the data, calling it unreliable and misleading, arguing that weak investment and an understated deflator hide the real inflation faced by people.
It is a big blow for those who peddle the Indian economy is dead narrative. India has just registered a blistering 8.2% GDP growth rate, and this is up from 5.6% GDP growth rate in the last year in the same period. Inflation is at all-time low, and we are seeing highest exports, highest foreign direct investment. This is the Indian economy showing the entire world a path of progress and development. But there are some within the country who say Indian economy is dead. They peddle these narratives because in their hatred for Prime Minister Modi.
ये अच्छी बात है, अगर हमारा जीडीपी बढ़ रहा है तो ये देश के लिए अच्छी बात है और ये बात सही है कि ट्रम्प टैरिफ के बाद हमारे जो मैन्युफैक्चरर है और हमारी जो इंडस्ट्री है, इसका मतलब है कि उन्होंने काफ़ी इसमें मेहनत किया है और क्रेडिट goes to them.
So we have CNN News18's Pallavi Ghosh joining us live right now. Pallavi, so this is great news that India's GDP growth for the second quarter of financial year 2025 to 2026 has come in at 8.2%. But how do you think the government is reconciling this number with weak job data and subdued rural demand?
So it's an ongoing process. The GDP growth rate also becomes a benchmark and a barometer to show that which are the sectors which are growing. Now, if you look, for example, to give a very trivial example, this increase in sales of tractors, that shows that there's a spurge as far as modernization and an extension of the agricultural sector is concerned. There's also been an increase in the automobile sales. There's also been an increase in the manufacturing sector. And almost over 8% of a GDP growth rate is indicative of the fact that they are those key infrastructural sectors which seems to be pushing the GDP growth up. So how is the government looking at it? We are looking at a new budget coming up, but also the government is looking at more job opportunities being thrown up with a special focus on the medium sectors. The second important thing is many of the multinationals opening shops here, Apple's. So the government feels that this is one which can actually push up the employment opportunities and address the concerns over jobs.
Right. So, Pallavi, this is like a two-step question. First of all, I think all biz experts at this point would be interested in knowing how does the growth rate compare to other large emerging economies in the same quarter? And also, secondly, what is the plan to reduce political friction, over the credibility of economic data?
But to answer your first question first, the data again, which has been put out by the government and by the finance ministry, actually gives a stark comparison to many of the so-called developed countries like Germany, for example, China, also America, where what we are very quickly to wrap up on this is the growth in those countries have been showing an increase of 3 to 4%. So it's been between a margin of 2 to maximum 8%, whereas in India, the growth story has been the S&Ps, Moody's, all of them have predicted a 7.5% to 7.8% GDP growth. We showed an 8.2%. So that is how we stand in contrast to them. Then second question, of course, we're already seeing reactions which have come in from the former finance minister, also from Jairam Ramesh and Rahul Gandhi. Winter session begins on the 1st of December. You are going to be seeing that there is going to be an attempt which is going to be made by the opposition, particularly the Congress party, to call out the bluff of the government, saying that these figures do not reflect the real problem on the ground, which is that of jobs.
Right. Thank you, Pallavi, for sharing your input with us.